Ladies, welcome on in. I'm joined today by Allan Ball, who is the director of White Ribbon, and it's the largest movement in the world focused on engaging men and boys to eliminate gendered violence towards women and children. Welcome on in, Allan.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, and it's great to be here, and particularly hello to the listeners today.
Thank you so much, Allan. So before I start, I know that you would like to say something that's very, very important that we need to share with our listeners.
Yes, we must, and it's very important to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land which I'm recording this from today. So I'm on Kaurna country here in South Australia, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and just acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. And if there's any First Nations people listening to the podcast today, my respect goes out to you and welcome, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Allan. Such an important message to start with. So, Allan, we know that the vast majority of men out there are against gendered violence. Like, we know that. White Ribbon really is here to make women's safety a men's issue, a man's issue. Can you talk a little bit to our listeners about that?
Great. It's a great question. And in fact, I think it's a really good conversation starter, because fundamentally what we're asking there is, how do we make women's safety a men's issue? And White Ribbon Australia has existed for that very point, ensuring that we are creating and crafting a space that's comfortable for men to lean into, to understand the tools, the resources, the frameworks, the literature, and the why women's safety needs to be something that men have to pay attention to. And it really comes down to, and I'm going to take our listeners on a bit of a journey here, but when we look at the issue of women's safety, it really is about what is driving it, what is actually underpinning a sense of unsafety in our community. And community attitudes is a really good place to start, and understanding that our attitudes are influenced by our social, our cultural norms. And when we think about engaging on the issue, we have to first start with self. So we have to understand, what is the attitude that I'm bringing to my everyday conversations? What are the things that are influencing me and the way that I was brought up, or the way that is reinforcing the way that I was brought up? And how are we particularly equipped to respond if violence, disrespect, or abuse is visited in our worlds? And because the majority of violence against women is perpetrated by men, so if you're a cis woman, trans woman, or even if you're a man, even a male victim, the main perpetrator is still men. And men's attitudes are pivotal to accountability and responsibility for that violence. So when we flip it on its head, and I think it's a really important point to do, when we talk about women's violence or domestic violence, it's often done in a reductive way. If we flip it on its head and talk about men's perpetration of violence, or men's murder of women, because as of this recording, I know we're doing it at the start of August, with men have murdered a woman 26 times this year in domestic homicide.
Yeah.
So
the numbers in Australia are shocking, aren't they? It's one a week. A woman is killed every single week in Australia by the hands of an intimate male partner.
And it is horrible, and it's catastrophic. And we should be zero. That should be the absolute target. And then we know that physical violence is just one form of violence.
Yes.
There's a whole continuum, unfortunately. And right now, I think in Australia, we're having really robust conversations around coercion and control, or psychological abuse. I know that there's some really good work happening with banks in Australia and financial institutions to look at what is their role and raising awareness around financial abuse. And then when you take an intersection lens to it, there are conversations happening, particularly around what do we need to do for First Nations women? What is the experience of new arrivals, migrants, or newly settled to Australia, and that intersection with culture? Mm-hmm. But when we strip all of that back, and if we boil it down to a kind of a single driver, we have to acknowledge that men are not at a scale and scope engaging in the issue.
Yes.
And what we see a lot is that men particularly minimize, deny, or trivialize women's experience of violence, disrespect, or abuse. And it's common. And it has absolutely shattering implications on the likelihood that women will seek assistance if they need it, or able to leave violent relationships.